30 years after democracy, the land map of South Africa looks broadly similar to the land map of apartheid South Africa. This is not because nothing has happened. Something has happened, but slowly, incompletely, and far short of what was promised. Approximately 72% of South Africa's agricultural land remains in white ownership. The post-apartheid government set a target in 1994: redistribute 30% of agricultural land by 2014. By 2024, approximately 10% has been transferred. The gap between the target and the reality is the subject of this series. Not the EFF version of the gap, not the DA version of the gap, the actual gap, measured in hectares, in court orders, in policies that worked and policies that did not. Our farm worker is standing at the border between what is and what was promised. He has been waiting 30 years. He has the deed of transfer document, whether it is his deed or a document he is still waiting to receive. June 19th, 1913. The Union of South Africa passes the Natives Land Act. Black South Africans, who are approximately 80% of the country's population, are confined to approximately 7% of its land. The rest is closed to them. This is not the beginning of land dispossession in South Africa. The colonial period preceded it, but the 1913 Act is the moment dispossession becomes formalized law, codified, enforced, and expanded over the following 8 decades. The decades that follow: the 1936 Native Trust and Land Act expanding the reserves to 13%, still deeply inadequate. The Group Areas Act forcing urban removals. The Bantustans, nominally independent homelands that were in practice overcrowded rural labor reservoirs. The farm worker is standing at the 1913 dateline. He says, this is where the story starts, not in 1994. He is correct. You cannot understand 2024 without 1913.
Section 25 of the South African Constitution, the Property Clause, the most politically weaponized section of a document that has been politically weaponized extensively. What it actually says? The state may expropriate property for a public purpose. Compensation is required. The compensation must be just and equitable, which courts determine, taking historical context into account. Just and equitable is not the same as full market value. The EFF says Section 25 allows zero compensation. The DA says it guarantees full market value. Constitutional lawyers say both of those readings are inaccurate. The constitutional lawyer in this cartoon has been trying to get a word in for 30 years. The Constitution allows land reform. It requires fair process. It allows below-market compensation in some circumstances. It does not allow simple seizure without any process. Both sides of the political debate regularly pretend otherwise.
1994. The ANC comes to power with a land reform target: redistribute 30% of agricultural land by 2014. The mechanism? Willing buyer, willing seller. The market will facilitate redistribution. The optimism is genuine. The problem is visible at the farm gate. The land reform grant is 100,000 rand. The farm is valued at 2 million rand. The gap between those two numbers is not a rounding error. It is a policy failure embedded in the mechanism from the beginning. Landowners have no incentive to sell below market value. Grants are underfunded relative to land prices. The land bank loans are available, but the process is slow. Farms are bought, but post-transfer support is inadequate, and many redistributed farms fail within years. 2014. The target date passes. Approximately 8% has been transferred. The target was 30%. The market did not facilitate redistribution. The political pressure for a different approach builds. 2013. The EFF launches with expropriation without compensation as its flagship land policy. The argument? Willing buyer, willing seller failed. The injustice of 1913 was state-sponsored. The state should correct it without paying landowners who benefited from that injustice. 2018. Parliament votes to investigate amending Section 25. An ANC-EFF majority carries the motion. The DA opposes. The debate is genuine. Does expropriation without compensation fix the land problem, or create a different one involving investment, food security, and Zimbabwe comparisons? The Section 25 Amendment Bill passes the National Assembly in 2021. It goes to the NCOP. The 6th Parliament's term ends before it is finalized. The bill lapses. The 7th Parliament must restart from the beginning. The sticky note says, must restart. The farm worker through the window has been waiting since 1913. He has noticed that lapsing is a recurring feature of South African land policy.
The real numbers. Land restitution. 80,000 plus claims lodged since 1994. The majority settled with financial compensation rather than land return, because in many cases the land had already been developed and physical return was impractical. Land redistribution. Multiple programs across 30 years. SLAG, LRAD, PLAS. Progress slow. Grants underfunded relative to land prices. Many transferred farms subsequently failed because post-transfer support was inadequate. Tenure reform. The extension of Security of Tenure Act protects farm workers from arbitrary eviction. Implementation is inconsistent. Evictions continue. The protection exists on paper more reliably than it exists in practice. Total agricultural land transferred through all programs, approximately 10% of the target of 30%. The farm worker is looking at the real numbers. These are the real numbers, not the political version from either side.
The land reform debate is dominated by agricultural land. Farms, redistribution, expropriation. This is real and important. But 60% of South Africans now live in urban areas, and millions of them have a different land problem. Township residents who have occupied their plots for decades, sometimes generations, often do not have title deeds. The municipality owns the land. Their security of tenure is insecure. They cannot fully leverage their home as an asset, cannot easily sell it, cannot seamlessly bequeath it. The constitutional lawyer in this cartoon has been trying to make this point for years. Agricultural redistribution and urban titling are different problems, requiring different solutions. The political debate treats them as one problem and solves neither well. The farm worker and the township resident both have land problems. They need different things. The political banner above them is large and covers both. The specific solution banners below them are small and mostly ignored.
Zimbabwe. Cited in every South African land debate, usually by people who have not studied it closely. What Zimbabwe shows, fast-track land seizures from 2000, without successor farmer support, without agricultural extension, without institutional backing, destroyed food production and contributed to economic collapse. The country went from food exporter to food importer. This is real and documented. What Zimbabwe does not show, that land reform itself is impossible. Namibia has been conducting market-based land reform for decades with food production maintained. Brazil, South Korea, Taiwan have all conducted successful land reform. The lesson is about how, not whether. The researcher has been tapping the whiteboard. The DA has been saying Zimbabwe. The EFF has been saying different context. Both are partially right and mostly unhelpful. The evidence says, plan it, fund it, support it, and it works. Don't, and it doesn't. The handover moment. Title deed, cameras, press release, government banner. The farm worker holds the deed. This is real.
This happens. The press release covers this. 6 months later, the tractor is broken. The land bank loan application has been in process for 6 months. The provincial extension officer covers 40 farms. The commercial buyer who knew the previous owner won't return calls. The crops are failing. Studies estimate that between 50 and 90% of redistributed farms underperform or fail within several years of transfer. Land reform opponents cite this statistic as evidence that land reform cannot work. It is actually evidence that land reform without post-transfer support cannot work. These are different arguments. Scenario B, transfer with extension, market access, finance, and mentorship, produces functioning farms. Scenario B costs more upfront. It costs less over time. The South African government has persistently funded Scenario A and blamed Scenario B for the results.
Step 1. Know what you are reforming. A comprehensive national land audit, transparent, publicly accessible, regularly updated. South Africa does not have one. You cannot reform what you cannot accurately measure. Step 2. Fund the grants to compete with land values. The land bank preferential lending, combined with adequately sized grants, closes the funding gap at the farm gate. The transaction becomes possible. The willing seller mechanism can work when the funding is real. Step 3. Post-transfer support package. Extension officer, market access, equipment finance, mentorship as a mandatory component of every transfer, not an optional addition. Scenario B, not Scenario A. Step 4. Urban titling in parallel. Millions of township residents hold no title to their plots. Formalizing that ownership is cheap, fast, and immediately improves asset security for the most vulnerable urban residents. It receives a fraction of the political attention it deserves. The land debate produces enormous quantities of political noise. The EFF is loud. The DA is loud. The ANC speaks carefully and at length. The storm is constant. The lightning is frequent. In the middle of the storm, constitutional lawyers and land reform researchers trying to be heard. Their speech bubbles contain actual evidence. They are mostly inaudible above the thunder. On the ground, below the clouds, our farm worker. He has been waiting since 1913. The deed of transfer is still waiting to be stamped. The practical signs, audit, fund, support, title deeds, are on the ground around him, pointing in the right direction. Nobody above the clouds is reading the signs. The farm worker is not shouting. He is not storming. He is waiting. He has had a lot of practice.
Dawn, a South African farm. Red soil. A farm worker who has worked this land for decades. The deed in his pocket is not yet stamped. The storm above is still going. The signs in the soil are still pointing. He bends down and picks up a handful of red South African earth. This soil has been farmed for generations by people who did not legally own it. 30 years after democracy, the ownership maps have moved 10% toward the 30% target. The signs are in the soil. Audit, fund, support, title deeds. They are not complicated signs. They are not new signs. They have been here, planted by researchers and practitioners for decades. The political storm above is louder than the signs. The soil runs through his fingers, back to the ground. His expression? The specific South African expression that means the paper is 30 years overdue. The soil is not going anywhere. Neither am I. Mzansi Eina. Because, somebody has to say it.